This video covers the IGCSE Biology Objective 6.1.5a on the 2025 CAIE syllabus to outline the use and storage of the carbohydrate starch. So, photosynthesis produces glucose. We've already talked about that. Now, the glucose can be used in a variety of ways depicted here, but we are going to focus on starch in this particular video. So what is starch? So I think we've already addressed this when we talked about biological molecules just very briefly, but let's just expound on that a little bit more. So we see that starch is an insoluble organic molecule. So that's something you already should know from your study of biological molecules. So remember, we talked about the fact that plants have starch grains in their leaves. So photosynthesis is happening, glucose is being produced, and because glucose is soluble, it potentially could be used to do respiration, and that may not be what the plant needs at that time. So it wants to store it before it can be used in another way. So the plant will convert the glucose into starch grains, and so starch is an insoluble organic molecule, and this is what we would find in the chloroplast as photosynthesis is happening. So how is starch used? Well, of course, we've already said that plants are doing lots of photosynthesis, so they're making much more glucose than they need for immediate energy use. So here we see these starch grains that have been dyed blue with the use of the indicator iodine, which we've already talked about. And so we can see definitely that there is starch in wherever this is, whatever microscopic image this is. We see the starch grains. Perhaps this is in a leaf of a plant, and so the starch grains are there as the leaf is doing photosynthesis. So they store the glucose by turning it into starch, and so it can be stored in a variety of locations. So it can be stored as a bulb, such as an onion, which are actually modified leaves of a particular plant. So for an onion plant, the onion itself is actually a modified leaf organ, and that is where the starch will be stored. In carrots, for example, we have storage in roots, in the actual root structure of the plant. And so the starch is going to be stored there. And so we have the carrot vegetable. Then we have tubers. Tubers are things like cassava and potatoes and those sorts of vegetables, and those are modified stems. So in those plants, the starch is stored in the tubers in these modified stems. So different types of plants will have different ways of storing the starch to be saved for use later in a variety of ways, so that stored starch can be used in a new growing season. So let's take a potato, for example. So the potato forms. Now, the growing season for the green portion of the plant, the part that is above the soil, eventually that part is going to die. What's left now is the potato under the soil. And now that starch will be broken down into glucose, so the glucose can be used for respiration to now produce new green parts into the next growing season. And then the plant will start to do photosynthesis again. So typically the starch is stored in order for the plant to do something else with it later. We just get these vegetables as a byproduct of their storage.